Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to the Woo Curious podcast. Your map to the mystical, your key to the sacred, and your guide back home to yourself. I'm Eileen, a writer, a spiritual coach, energy healer, and slow living witch. This podcast is your invitation to explore a world where the mundane and the sacred intertwine. It's a haven for those ready to take the first steps into the realms of magic and mystery, providing a safe space for you to embark on your own enchanted journey towards healing and self-discovery. Here, I'll unveil the whispers of the mystical, the rituals often hidden in plain sight, and I'll engage in sacred conversation intended to stir your soul and lead you back into your power. I'm all about demystifying woo and witchcraft. So, whether you're a seasoned seeker or simply woo curious, I'm so delighted you've decided to join me on this journey. Let's make magic. Hey Woo Crew! Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to take a moment to let you know that over the next few weeks, I'll be sharing a little bit about my upcoming course, Unleash Your Inner Witch, a beginner's guide to witchcraft for the woo curious. This will be the fourth time that I run this signature program, and I truly hope that you will consider joining me. Though I do say it's for the woo curious, I've had several women join who describe themselves as fully woo before entering the space, and so it really does serve a wide range of woo-ness, if you will. The waitlist is open until February 24th, and trust me when I say that you'll want to be on that list if you think you even might want to join us, as there are some really juicy exclusive bonuses for those on the list when doors open. We begin on March 5th, and you can find all of the details over on my website, myluminouslife.ca/unleashyourinnerwitch, or send me a message on Instagram at IamEileenMarch. Hello, and welcome back, Woo Crew, to another episode of the Woo Curious podcast. I am your host, Eileen, and I'm here today with another solo episode. I'm going to be doing more solo episodes for the next little while and fewer guest episodes, just as an experiment, partly, and as a way to deepen into what it is that I really want to be bringing you and offering you in this space. And because in a lot of ways, recording a guest episode feels easier because I only need to provide the questions and the conversation provides a lot of the material. If there are any topics that you would like me to touch upon, to speak to, please reach out. Let me know. You can comment on this episode if you're listening on Spotify or you're watching on YouTube. You can send me a message at IamEileenMarch on Instagram. You can send me an email, Eileen@myluminouslife. However you want to get a hold of me, if there is anything that you want me to speak to, even if I've spoken to it before, I can always dive deeper, revisit. I often feel like I can't say the same things twice because it will be boring, and then I remember how often I need to hear the same thing over and over in slightly different words and spoken by perhaps different people or at different times in my life, and things just land differently depending on when we hear them. And because this is the month of love, because it's the month of February, the ancient Roman festival of Februalia, it's a month of cleansing and purification and also of connection and passion. I want to speak to something that comes up very frequently for me when I'm working with clients, either one-on-one or inside of the various containers that I offer. And that is the importance of ritual. And so how does ritual connect with love? How does it connect with purification, with cleansing, with the themes of February? Well, in so many ways. And I want to speak to it and the theme specifically of self-love for this month and how ritual can support us, can be part of our daily self-care practice. When we think about ritual, often it feels really, really formal. Often it feels like something that we have to set aside time for and create structure around and do the same way every time. And there is place for that kind of ritual, but often when we think of ritual that way, with that really rigid structure, with that specific time and place, we're more getting into the realm of ceremony. And both ritual and ceremony are something that we dive deeply into within my flagship course, Unleash Your Inner Witch. It's a 6-week course. I call it a beginner's course in witchcraft for the woo curious, although a recent participant described it simply as a coming home, which gave me all the shivers and tingles and chills. But part of that course, we begin with ritual and crafting it and its importance. And so I wanted to speak to this piece of what I teach inside that space, of what I teach every time I circle or sit with women, because that course is coming up again as well. And so to give you a bit of a taste of the impact that the simple shifts and rememberings can have on our lives. So ritual can be more formal, and we can also ritualize all those mundane aspects of our days. And for me, when I think about the difference between, ritual and ceremony, ceremony requires other people to witness it, I believe. You might be able to find a definition that doesn't say that, but ceremony is to mark transitional events, big moments in the year, life events, and it is best done with others. Whereas ritual can certainly be done in company, but it also can be done solo. It doesn't need to be marking some big shift or event. It doesn't need to happen at the same time every year or every month. It's not tied that way to these delineators of time or of significance in our lives. It is a way to imbue significance and meaning and presence into our day-to-day, into the mundane, into the routine of it all. I find that when I choose to ritualize something that I do every day, it becomes easier to do. It becomes less of a chore. And so it's a really lovely tool if you're trying to implement any kind of new habits or routines or practices into your life. Ritualizing those practices can make it easier to drop into them. Doing so can make it easier to do these new behaviors consistently. And as I mentioned, it really just brings some magic into these acts that are otherwise often very mundane, very rote, very sometimes boring or almost even annoying. How many times have you been like, I don't want to brush my teeth before bed? Maybe you're not one of those people. Some people are like, I can't even imagine not wanting to do that. But while I love going to bed with a clean mouth, there are times when I'm so tired that I'm like, I don't want to have to do one more thing before I get in bed. But when we can ritualize some of those more mundane things in our lives, it gives them a greater sense of purpose and magic. When, for instance, let's stay on this theme of brushing teeth, when I use that time to check in with my body, to really feel the toothbrush against my gums and the pleasurable sensation that brings, to set the intention of this toothbrushing ritual as a form of self-devotion, self-care, self-touch, like bodily, physical care for myself, it makes me want to do it. And it lends the whole process, again, just more sparkle, more joy, more light, however you want to describe it. There's some beautiful quotes from people much wiser than myself about ritual. One that really struck me is this: ritual renders time habitable. That was spoken or said or written, I'm not actually sure, by Byung-Chul Han. And it really struck me because so much of the work I do for myself, with with others, is focused around time. and how in our current modern day society, we are finding ourselves rushing through time so frequently. We feel like we are running out of time. We feel like we don't have enough time. There are not enough hours in the day, so much to do, so little time. Like, we have a lot of language around this perceived sense of a lack of time. And when I read this quote, "Ritual renders time habitable," it made me aware of the potency of ritual to create spaciousness and time in our days. And so you may have joined me for the Sacred Start workshop that I did back in January, if you've been with me for a little while, and you may not have. You may have worked with me in the past, you may not have. You may have heard me speak to this before, and you may not have. But one of the most potent times of day to begin to weave in ritual is in the morning, is at the beginning. And again, if you've been here with me for a while, you might also remember that in the Celtic view of time and the calendar and the moving of day and night, the day begins with dusk, when the sun dips below the horizon and we prepare for rest before we prepare to do. So whether or not you perceive the beginning of the day at dusk, or whether you perceive the beginning of the day at dawn in the morning, how we begin our mornings is really important. How we end our days as well, or begin our dusking days, is also important. But when we wake from sleep, when we wake from that state of deep rest, hopefully deep, that place where our brain gets to drop into those deeper, slower waves, where our subconscious comes out to play in our dreams, we wake up with so much potential to set the tone to carry us through the rest of our waking day. And weaving ritual into that morning can really shift the way that we experience the rest of the entire day. I know that so many of us feel as though we don't have time to fit another thing into our mornings. I speak to so many women who feel like the morning is chaos, or it's just manageable as long as nothing goes even a little bit wrong. As long as no egg falls out of the fridge and smashes on the floor and now we have to clean it up. As long as no kid walks into the bathroom and pees all over the floor while we're on the toilet. That happened to one of my clients. I'm sure she'll be laughing as she hears this, right? We have this sense of like, okay, well, I can just get through, but it feels rushed. It feels chaotic. It feels frenzied and frantic. And my brain's going a mile a minute thinking about all the things I need to get done. And I'm rushing, so I'm more likely to drop the mascara in the toilet or what have you. And by ritualizing that morning routine and consciously integrating mindfulness, really, awareness and micro moments of pause, we can really set ourselves up for a day that feels significantly more spacious. We set ourselves up in what a coach that I trained with calls sage brain mode, where we have more reserves to be able to carry on through our day in response instead of in reaction. And so the practices that I often encourage my clients to do to begin the day, the morning, with more calm, with more spaciousness, with more capacity and ease, are so simple, and they don't add to the morning routine in terms of time. That was one of the big resistances I come up against with clients all the time. They're like, sure, I'd love to get up and meditate and journal and do some body work, but I don't have time to do that. I've got 2 kids, and like the dog needs to get fed and walked, and the kids got to get out the door to school. And there's real demands on the time. And it's like, I don't want to get up an hour earlier. I already don't get enough sleep. That's all very legitimate. And so what we do is we create time within the confines of what needs to get done. So, for example, I was on a call today with a client, and I encouraged her to take a pause just at that moment before getting out of bed. So your alarm goes off. Hopefully you get up right away. We know that that's easier if we can just get up and get moving, but maybe you've hit snooze, and you give yourself compassion for that. You reserve judgment, right? But when you do decide, okay, I'm getting out of bed, your feet land on the floor. Before you stand up, you take 1, 2, or 3 breaths where you just feel your feet on the floor, where you notice the sensation of your feet on the floor. And then you get up. And perhaps, like me, your next step is to move to the bathroom and brush your teeth. And so, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, when you get to that stage, when you're brushing your teeth, rather than using it as a time where you're running through the list of to-dos in the day and getting more and more worked up about how much you have to do and how there's no way you could possibly get it all done, you remind yourself that 2 minutes is not going to make or break the day, and that this 2 minutes while you're brushing your teeth is about self-care. And so you focus on the pleasurable sensation of that toothbrush against your gums. And you think about how this practice of brushing your teeth is a practice of caring for this beautiful bodily vessel that you find yourself in this incarnation. And then perhaps your next step of the morning, I'm basically walking you through my own morning. Your next step is to make coffee. And so when you're pouring the beans, grinding the beans, bringing awareness to how good those beans smelled. And then as a bonus, bringing in some gratitude and maybe even speaking some gratitude for all of the people and all of the things that had to be in place and had to happen to get those beans from a coffee plant, likely in South America, all the way to your kitchen this morning. And so then we're calling in and cultivating feelings of gratitude and a little bit of wonder and awe sometimes, even when we think really hard about everything that has to happen for us to have access to the things that we have access to every day of our lives. That builds that gratitude muscle, that mindfulness muscle, that presence muscle. And we have so many studies supporting how beneficial it is to our mental health when we can cultivate gratitude. And so that's just 3 tiny examples of how my mornings are ritualized. These things I do every day bring slowness and pause into my morning. I complete the 3 while my kettle is boiling, usually by doing some Mayan breathing techniques and speaking my morning prayers outside when it's not minus 25 like it is this week in Calgary. Connecting to the earth for me is important. And at this point of the year, when it is too cold, I simply look out the window and connect with the spirits of the trees and the birds and the squirrels and whatever life I can see outside my window. And I want to state here too that I'm not perfect. I don't remember to do this every day. I can also get swept up in the busy and the hustle and everything's shifting. Recently, my partner got a new job and he's working on Eastern hours. We're in Mountain Time. And so he's up and working by 7. And that has really thrown my whole morning for a bit of a loop. I've had to recalibrate. Usually he stays in bed till closer to 8:30, and I get up at like 6:30 or 7 to have a bubble of precious time in the morning just for me. And so it's been a recalibration and I haven't been as consistent, and I've really, really, really noticed it. Even when all I forget to do is to speak that morning prayer or to spend those 2 minutes that I'm brushing my teeth in the presence of my toothbrush instead of already opening my phone and checking emails. It makes a huge difference to my day. And I know it makes a huge difference to my clients' days. It's not just me. I am not an experiment of one, although I am that as well. But I've witnessed firsthand and been told and had, that this feedback shared with me by so many women at this point, that these micro moments of ritual and rest, because there's rest in every exhale, these micro practices that we can weave into our days as they already exist, they truly create spaciousness and time. Time is not linear. Time is not a static, definable entity. It is malleable. It can stretch. It can shrink. And we can influence it. And so playing with those kinds of ideas, playing with even just telling yourself the story of, I have so much time in the morning. Even if you're a part of your brain is like, no, you don't, you're late already and you have too many things to do, right? Being like, I hear you. Thank you. That's not useful. It's not helpful. It's not supporting me. I have so much time. And then just moving through each of those things efficiently, as quickly as you need to, noticing, pausing in the exhales, practicing that awareness, cultivating a little bit of gratitude. It doesn't require that you stop or even slow down all that much, although you might find that there is space to slow down as you integrate this. But it is a magical practice, this ritualizing of your morning. And it's something that we work on really intentionally throughout Unleash Your Inner Witch. This course has been a really, really beautiful space to deepen into so many of the teachings that I always want to be offering up to the world. And the response from the women inside has been just so beautiful. Every time I get to offer it, it feels like we go deeper. The connections between the participants are getting stronger, and the magic that unfolds is always a wonder and delight to me. It's less here's how to XYZ, and more gentle teachings on a different way to move in the world. So if you're curious at all to join us, the wait list is currently open. I encourage you to hop on it because there will be some special bonuses available only to those who are on the wait list, including a printed copy of the whole book that I've created of all of our lessons and our learnings, and space to write notes inside of it. I'm so excited to have a printed copy of all of this. And there'll be a few other bonuses at the time of recording yet to be determined for everybody who is on that wait list when you decide to jump in. Of course, there's no pressure. You can hop on the wait list because you want to know all of those details and be the first with all the access. And you can choose that it's not for you right now. And that is 100% okay too. There's lots of information over on my website, myluminouslife.ca/unleash your inner witch. And I'll be linking that below in the show notes and below the video on YouTube. If you have any questions, I told you all the ways to get a hold of me at the beginning of this recording, and those hold true for this offer as well. Send me a voice note over on Instagram or send me an email. I would love to chat. I would love to answer any of your questions. No, you do not need to consider yourself or ever call yourself a witch to join this course. I promise. I promise. And you don't have to tell anyone you're joining either if that feels uncomfortable. And you might just find when you join that there's a little witch in you after all, if there isn't already. Okay, Woo Crew, that's all from me for today. I would love to hear if you implement some of the ritual tools or tips that I spoke about here today into your morning routine, into your days. Maybe you ritualize what happens after dusk as well and set yourself up for the most easeful, spacious morning by prepping the night before. Whatever it might be, let me know in the comments. Let me know over on Instagram at Eileen March. If you like this episode, please consider leaving a rating, a review, a thumbs up, subscribe, all those things wherever, whatever platform you're on and whatever's relevant. It helps ever so much when you share about this podcast with your friends. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll talk to you next week.